There are worlds where the infection begins not with claws, nor with fangs, nor with the beating of alien wings against the void. It begins with a whisper, a voice so soft it could be mistaken for one's own thoughts, a gentle pressure in the mind like a hand resting on the shoulder. The first level of worship, the first fracture in loyalty, and like all heresies, it is quiet, almost tender, almost holy. The Genestealer does not announce itself, it does not roar or conquer, it simply arrives, a shadow in a dockside tavern, a figure glimpsed in a hydroponics bay, a stranger who never seemed to have a name, but always seemed to be near. It chooses the lonely, the forgotten, the ones who speak their prayers into the dark and hear nothing returned. The Imperium is vast, and in its vastness many souls are abandoned. The Tyranid cult does not convert by force. It offers belonging. It offers family. It begins with a touch, skin to skin, so brief that it could be mistaken as accidental. Yet beneath that touch, beneath the illusion of contact, something is planted, a memory that is not human, a longing that does not originate in the heart but blooms there nonetheless, an ache, a calling, a promise that somewhere beyond the smog-choked sky there is something that sees them, knows them, loves them. To the infected this is not horror, it is revelation. Their dreams change first. They begin to feel watched, but not in fear, in comfort. They begin to feel guided. They awaken with tears on their cheeks and cannot explain why they weep. They stand in crowds and suddenly feel every stranger as a sibling. Their loneliness dissolves. Their identity unwinds. The Emperor, distant and unmoving, becomes replaced with something intimate, something that breathes with them, something that hungers. The first level of worship is adoration through emptiness. The cultist does not yet know what they serve, only that it fills the void where hope once lived. They begin to speak of community, of unity, of the end of sorrow. They gather in cellars, basements, under Hive tunnels, whispering hymns that have no words, only a rising and falling tone like the calling song of deep ocean creatures, a lullaby of the swarm. And soon the infected look upon the world and see it as a prison. The Imperium becomes the jailer. The Emperor becomes the distant absentee father. Humanity becomes frail. The cult does not argue this. The cult only listens, nods, embraces. This is why the first level is the most dangerous, because it feels like love. And love, once given, is not easily reclaimed. So remember this. Not every worshipper of the Tyranid begins as a monster. Some begin as a person who simply needed to be held. They gather first in silence, not in temples, nor in shrines, nor in any place where light rests comfortably. The second level of Tyranid worship is not conversion, it is congregation. A slow and careful drawing together of the touched, the dreaming, the quietly changed. They do not yet call themselves a cult. The word would frighten them. They call themselves neighbors, friends, the faithful who understand. They are bound by a feeling they cannot name, only sense. A shared pulse behind their ribs. A shared breath that seems to move through many lungs as one. It begins in small gatherings, 2, then 3, then 6, always in forgotten spaces. Rusted Hab complex laundries, abandoned manufactorum alcoves, the crawl spaces beneath transit stations where machine oil drips like slow rain. They arrive through different doors, at different times, never speaking of why, yet each one knows why. Once there, they sit in a circle, hands resting on their knees, back straight, waiting. There are no candles, no icons, no relics, only breath. Slow, synchronized breath. Their hearts do the rest. A single voice speaks first. Always one who was touched earliest. Always one who felt the whisper longest. They do not preach. They only describe. What they saw in sleep. What they felt upon waking. The sensation of being seen from beyond the stars. The sense that the galaxy is not cruel, but indifferent, and that indifference has chosen to adopt them like orphan children. Their words are gentle, and the others listen with reverence deeper than any cathedral sermon has ever earned. There is no doctrine, no scripture, only resonance. And resonance is enough. When one speaks, the others nod slowly, tears slipping quietly down their cheeks. Not tears of grief, but release. Relief. The relief of being understood without explanation. It is the rarest form of devotion, the devotion born not from fear, nor from awe, but from recognition. They recognize the same hunger in one another, the same wound, the same yearning for unity. It is here that the first leader arises, not appointed, not declared, chosen only by the way others turn toward them. Their voice is calm, their gaze unwavering. They are the one who has accepted the truth most fully, that individuality is a burden humanity was never meant to carry. They speak of the swarm not as a threat, but as a returning mother. The galaxy does not forget its flesh. It retrieves it, and the gathered listen. Their gatherings grow more confident, longer, more frequent. They begin to help one another outside the circle. A shared meal, a repaired door, a watchful eye when patrol servitors pass. Trust is woven like sinew into a shared skeleton. They become one body, though they still wear many faces. Yet all of this is still only preparation. They have not yet seen the patriarch. They have not yet heard the voice directly. They only wait, and waiting is worship. It happens in darkness, always, for the patriarch is not a creature meant for the sight of unbroken minds. The third level of worship begins the moment the congregation is deemed ready, when their hearts have synchronized, when their dreams no longer belong to them, when their names have begun to dissolve into something plural. Only then does the one who first carried the seed bring them to the hidden sanctum, a place beneath the city, beneath the dust, beneath memory. No imperial map acknowledges it, no servitor patrol wanders close. The air tastes of stone, metal, and old breath. They descend in silence. The chosen speak to no one. Their footsteps echo like slow heartbeats. They feel the presence before they see it, a pressure inside the skull, a warmth behind the eyes, a presence that watches not from above or ahead, but within. Their thoughts begin to braid. They know one another fully, not through words, but through sensation, joy, hunger, longing, devotion. No secret survives here, no loneliness remains. And then they see him. The patriarch is enormous, yet still. A throne of limbs folded upon themselves, grown like cathedral pillars of bone and sinew. His skin glistens like wet stone in the dim violet glow of bioluminescent sacs. His eyes, if eyes they can be called, are pools of ancient hunger, not rage, not hate, hunger as old as creation itself, patient and all-consuming. Around him, offerings lie in silence, broken chains, discarded ration tokens, torn ecclesiarchy pamphlets, all symbols of discarded loyalty. The first reaction is not fear, it is awe, awe that burns through every vein like sacred fire, awe that breaks the concept of the emperor as a distant father and replaces him with a living parent, breathing, present, here. Some fall to their knees without command. Some approach, hands trembling. Some weep without knowing why. For the patriarch does not speak with voice or gesture. He speaks in memory. Memories that do not belong to humans. Memories of void black oceans between galaxies. Memories of worlds stripped bare, clean, silent. Memories of unity so complete that no thought stands alone. He shows them a future where there is no death because there is no self to die. The touch does not require claws, only presence, only gaze. And when his influence wraps around their minds, it does so with tenderness. The transformation is not violent, it is a surrender willingly given. The chosen leave the chamber changed. Their spines straighten, their eyes deepen. Their footsteps no longer belong to individuals but to a procession. The cult no longer imagines unity, they are unity. And with this, a new truth settles among them. They are no longer merely believers, they are limbs, nerves, vessels. They are no longer waiting for a god to return. He is already here, and he is hungry. Once touched by the patriarch, devotion ceases to be a matter of belief. It becomes a matter of biology. The fourth level of worship is not about gathering, nor vision, nor awe. It is the moment when faith turns to function. The cultists no longer follow because they hope. They follow because their bodies now carry the voice. The patriarch's will pulses through their blood like a second heartbeat. Every inhale is a prayer. Every exhale is obedience. It is no longer worship. It is respiration. The transformation is subtle at first. A tightening of motions. A synchrony of steps. They speak less, but when they do, their voices harmonize unconsciously, like a choir tuning to the same key. Their pupils dilate when they hear certain frequencies, particularly the subsonic hum of industrial engines or distant ventilation fans. They are listening not to sound, but to the hidden hymns beneath it. Rhythms that mirror the cadence of the swarm. Patterns older than the Imperium, older than humanity. Soon, words become unnecessary. The cult communicates through glances, slight movements of the jaw, shifts in breathing. Outsiders feel uneasy around them without knowing why. They describe the cultists as too calm, too synchronized, too sure. There is something predatory in such stillness, something designed, but the cultists do not perceive themselves as predators. They see themselves as instruments. The swarm does not kill out of cruelty. It consumes to expand its song. Their gatherings change shape, no longer seated circles. Now they stand in spiraled formations, bodies swaying gently, chests rising and falling in unison like the tides of some great oceanic creature. There are no lyrics. The hymn is breath itself, long inhalations drawn in together, long exhalations released together. It is meditation. It is surrender. It is rehearsal. For what? For arrival. Flesh begins to shift. Not drastically, not yet, just slight changes. The teeth sharpen by fractions, the skin thickens, the hands grow more deft. But the most profound alteration is unseen. The mind's threshold of empathy narrows. Love remains, but it is no longer individual. Cultists no longer love specific people. They love the collective. A spouse becomes no different than a stranger, unless both are part of the congregation. A child born outside the faith is not hated, but pitied. A soul waiting to be reclaimed. This is the hymnal stage, when identity fades like ink left in rain. The ecclesiarchy calls this possession. The Inquisition calls it corruption. But to the cult, it is liberation. To be freed from grief, from yearning, from doubt. What greater mercy exists? The human mind, once isolated and fragile, becomes an organ in a greater body. Fear dissolves. Pain loses relevance. The emperor demands sacrifice for salvation. The patriarch promises salvation in surrender. The cultists begin to smile more. But their smiles do not reach their eyes, for those eyes now see only the coming horizon, and the shadow that grows upon it. By the fifth stage of their rise, the cult is no longer a gathering of believers. It is an ecosystem, a living structure woven through the arteries of a city that never realized it was being hollowed from within. The transformation is not explosive. It is patient. The Imperium believes heresy arrives like fire, but the Genestealer cult spreads like mold. Quiet, persistent, inevitable. It begins with laborers, dock crews, sanitation workers, miners, servitors, overseers, the overlooked hands that keep the city alive. They move without notice, and so the cult moves with them. They do not shout, they do not march, they do not display symbols. Their worship has no banners. Instead, they install themselves into function. A shift foreman who schedules workers in intersecting rotations. A warehouse inventory officer who misplaces crates that reappear elsewhere. A Vox operator who routes emergency calls 3 minutes slower than required. No one suspects the smiling neighbor. No one suspects the tired worker who keeps to himself. This is the genius of the patriarch's will, to never challenge the city, only to become it. The cult establishes safe houses disguised as communal hostels, kitchens where meals are shared, but the conversations move not with words, but with silence, a shared glance, a subtle nod. Children play in alleyways, humming the quiet hymns of breath and rhythm, and no passerby thinks to ask where they learned the tune. They grow up inside the faith, never knowing a world outside it. Their minds never fracture because they were never separate. They do not lose themselves. They never learn to be individuals in the first place. The imperial creed teaches duty through separation: citizen, priest, soldier, governor. The cult teaches unity through erasure. All roles are one body. All tasks feed the swarm. A janitor sweeping the floors performs the same worship as the acolyte who carries messages to the patriarch. Purpose is no longer assigned. It is inherent. To exist is to serve. Still, the cult remains invisible. Not every member is changed in flesh. Many look perfectly normal, speak perfectly normal, work perfectly normal. But there is a rhythm to their movements. They wait a second before answering questions. They breathe in time with one another. Their footsteps align on stairs. These are small things, too small for the distracted, exhausted masses of the Imperium to notice. And the Administratum does not fear what it does not record. The city begins to feel calmer. Fewer disputes, fewer crimes of passion, fewer acts of desperation. Not because life has improved, but because individuality is dissolving. There is no need to argue when there is nothing left to want. The city exhales slowly, breathing as one. But beneath that stillness, something swells. Supply shipments begin to disappear. Tunnels are widened under old manufactorums. Sewers become corridors of pilgrimage. A new pulse enters the city soil. The city does not just house the cult. The city is beginning to become the cult. And soon, it will open its gates. When the city begins to breathe as one, the cult reaches the stage where sustenance is required. Not sustaining the body, sustaining the patriarch. The Tyranid faith is not a religion of symbols or parables. It is a faith of biomass, of flesh offered to the awakening of the swarm. And so, the sixth stage is not spiritual, but physical. It is the beginning of the silent harvest. It begins with the forgotten, the unsheltered, the unnamed. The Imperium's ledger of humanity has many blank pages, and the cult uses them well. A beggar found sleeping near a drainage tunnel simply does not wake. A lone night shift worker vanishes on their walk home. A vagrant is seen entering a disused elevator shaft and is never seen again. These disappearances do not alarm the authorities. They are dismissed as the common losses of a city too large to care for every breathing soul. The Administratum calls it statistically irrelevant attrition. The cult calls it offering. Deep beneath the livable levels, the sanctum of the patriarch expands. Tunnels, widened by hands that no longer feel fatigue. Chambers carved not by tools, but by claws guided with reverence. The cultists work without speaking, communicating through shared breath and subtle gestures. They bring bodies, living or already unconscious. They lay them in a circle around the patriarch, who stirs only slightly, his vast chest rising with slow, tectonic breath. The offering is not immediate slaughter. Some are kept alive. Their blood is harvested in slow, ritualistic increments. Their dreams bleed into the psychic hum of the lair, feeding the patriarch's mental reach across the cult. Those who survive too long cease to scream. They begin to hum with the same rhythmic breath. They are not converted. They are dissolved into the faith. Others are devoured more directly. The patriarch consumes not like a predator, but like a cathedral consumes incense, slowly, reverently, with purpose. Bones crack softly, flesh folds inward. There is no waste. Every drop of blood becomes hunger answered. And as the patriarch feeds, its influence grows. The The dreams of the cult intensify, no longer mere comfort, now direction. They see visions of future harvest, future transformation, future arrival. They see a sky darkened not by storm clouds, but by wings, by carapace, by the arrival of the great devourer. And instead of fear, they feel joy, they feel return, they feel purpose fulfilled. But something else also occurs. Those in the city who are not part of the faith begin to notice subtle wrongness. Night air smells faintly of copper. Water pressure fluctuates unpredictably. The floor plates in lower hab levels vibrate at night, as if something beneath is breathing. Livestock animals refuse to go near drainage grates. The city begins to listen to itself and hear its own pulse. There are always a few who feel fear first. They are the ones who will soon be offered next. For the harvest has only just begun. The city does not fall all at once. It unravels, slowly, quietly, like a tapestry left too long in damp air, its threads loosening one by one. The seventh stage is not triumph, but tension, the moment when worship meets consequence. The cult has grown too large to remain invisible. Its movements ripple through the streets, through the markets, through the work, crews and transit schedules. The facade of normal life begins to distort, and though most do not understand what they are seeing, they feel it. Rumors begin first. Someone whispers that the night shift workers at Refinery Block 32 have begun refusing to speak to anyone outside their crew. A merchant in the lower district swears she sees the same faces in the crowd every day, always watching, always silent. A medical clerk reports that 3 hospital patients simply walked out mid-treatment, and no one remembers seeing them leave. Coincidence, says the administratum. Statistical anomaly, random human error. But the unease spreads faster than the explanations. Guardsmen assigned to routine patrols begin to report interference. Not attacks, not sabotage, just obstruction. A misfiled work order forces a patrol to reroute down unfamiliar corridors. A tram system malfunction traps a squad inside a transit car for 4 hours. Door locks that worked the day before now require clearance codes no one recalls requesting. The city is no longer cooperating. It is reorganizing itself around the cult. The faithful feel the tension as anticipation. They know something is coming. They feel it in their bones, in their breath, in the steady, synchronized pulse beneath their skin. The patriarch no longer sleeps as deeply. His psychic presence hums like electricity through the underground. The dream visions intensify. They see stars swallowed whole. They see the sky tear open. They see themselves standing upon a world made clean, empty of individuality, empty of conflict, empty of suffering. But those outside the faith feel something very different. They feel watched. They feel followed. They feel the city itself turning against them, though they cannot explain how or why. Doors close a second too quickly. Elevators descend to levels no one selected. Groups of people stand together at street corners, silent, staring, breathing in unison. The smallest details become ominous. A child hums a tune with no melody. A row of workers turn their heads at the same exact moment. A neighbor smiles too widely and does not blink. Panic does not spread openly. Panic is a private thing. A tightening of the chest. A quickened step. A decision to avoid certain alleyways at dusk. The administratum issues calming notices. The ecclesiarchy schedules additional sermons. The governor assures the people that all is well. But all of this arrives too late, for the veil is fraying. And once the veil breaks, there will be no city, only hunger wearing its shape, only unity sharpened into purpose, only the first true breath of the swarm. There comes a moment in every cult uprising when silence is no longer sufficient. The faithful have gathered. The patriarch has fed. The city breathes to a rhythm not its own. But the Imperium is not blind forever. Suspicion has begun to simmer, and suspicion, left unchecked, becomes inquiry. Inquiry, in time, becomes purge. Thus, The 8th stage begins not with prayer, but with necessity. The cult must act, quietly, precisely, surgically. The first kill is never an enemy soldier, not a cleric, not a commissar. It is someone subtle, the one who notices. A factory inspector who lingers too long near a warehouse door that should have been locked. A Vox technician who wonders why certain transmissions no longer reach the upper relay towers. A scholar who sees the same faces appearing in census data across districts that should never intersect. They are not threats yet, but they could become so. The cult does not murder. Murder is personal, impulsive, wasteful. No, they remove obstacles. A worker is reported missing after leaving his shift. A sanitation official slips on wet stairs and fractures their skull. A clerk collapses from a sudden aneurysm. Each death is mundane. Each death is believable. Each death is intentional. There are no weapons left behind. No signs of struggle. No marks of rage. Only a growing pattern that no one sees in time. The patriarch does not command these acts directly. His will is a tide, and the cultists are vessels moved by its gravity. They know what must be done before the thought becomes conscious. It is not obedience, it is instinct. They do not question, they perform. Yet the killings are not the true beginning of the blade. The true beginning is the shift in spirit. The cultists become stiller, more watchful, less patient. Their smiles fade, their eyes sharpen. They move with the confidence of predators stalking familiar ground. The unity that once comforted now tightens into purpose. The hive mind's whispers grow louder, not yet audible as words, but unmistakable in pressure. The air itself feels heavier. The city's tension becomes palpable. Even those who do not understand begin locking doors earlier, avoiding eye contact, speaking in hushed tones. Then the first open strike occurs. A local arbitrator goes missing while investigating a warehouse suspected of unauthorized modifications. His squad finds him 3 levels down in the maintenance tunnels, alive but catatonic. His mind has been pulled open like a book. He repeats only one phrase, over and over. They're already here. His report never reaches higher command. His body disappears from Medici holding. The tunnels where he was found are sealed. The city pretends nothing happened. But the mask has slipped. The Imperium has noticed. The cult has begun to sharpen its claws. And somewhere beneath the stone and steel, the patriarch opens his many-jointed limbs just a little wider. For the time of quiet devotion is ending. The harvest is nearing its crescendo. War in the Imperium is usually loud. Trumpets, Vox sirens, the thunder of boots and tanks. But the war that begins here is not declared. It is not recognized. It does not even have a name in the city records. It is a war fought in glances, in mistrust, in shadows between street lamps. The 9th stage is the whisper. War, the quiet conflict between those who know and those who refuse to understand. The first faction is invisible. The cult, unified, certain. Their communications are silent, their purpose unwavering. They need not coordinate. They innately sense where they are needed, who must be removed, which corridors must be blocked, which engines must stall. Their strength is that they are many minds acting as one. The second faction is fragmented. The loyalists, ordinary citizens, arbitrators, workers, priests, and administrators who begin to notice that something in the city has changed. They speak cautiously, testing one another with half-formed suspicions. But suspicion cannot unify them. Fear isolates. Fear breaks trust. Where the cult sees unity, the loyalists see only shadows where allies might be enemies. So the city divides without ever announcing it has done so. One neighbor avoids another. A mother pulls her child closer when a group passes in synchronized step. Priests begin to preach more fervently about vigilance and purity, though their voices tremble with uncertainty. Arbitrators conduct raids, not on the cult's sanctuaries, but on innocent citizens reported by frightened neighbors. The Imperium, blind and vast, strikes wrong, and each wrong strike strengthens the cult's certainty that the Empire is already dying. No shots are fired. Yet the death toll rises. A rail conductor delays trains so the cult can move unobserved. A cook in a worker barracks distributes tainted rations that induce confusion and fatigue. A water technician alters filtration valves so that half the city begins experiencing shared hallucinations and waking dreams. But only the cult understands those dreams. Only the cult welcomes them. Whispers spread. The city is haunted. The air is poisoned. People are changing. The Emperor is testing us. No, the Emperor has abandoned us. Belief fractures. Faith falters. And where faith falters, the Patriarch's influence fills the void like water rushing into a shattered hull. Yet, something else emerges in this silent war. A leader, not of the cult, of the resistance. A single voice among the loyalists, calm, thinking, searching. Someone who has seen enough to know the threat, yet not so much that they have lost hope. They speak quietly in private rooms. They gather fragments of evidence. They ask questions that others are too afraid to ask. They see the city breathing in unison and know it is not reverence, it is infection. But the cult sees them too. And the cult does not allow anomalies. Thus, the whisper war tightens. The city holds its breath. Unity on one side, desperation on the other. And the Patriarch waits, knowing the loud war is coming. There is always one. One who resists not out of duty, nor faith, nor loyalty to distant thrones, but out of memory. The 10th stage of the cult's rise is defined not by the faithful, but by the last unbroken mind who stands against the tide. This individual is never a hero carved in marble. They are not a saint, nor a general, nor a commissar. They are a worker, a clerk, a teacher, a medic. Someone who lived among the cultists before they changed. Someone who loves them still, and because of that love, recognizes the horror of what they have become. His name was once spoken openly, but names lose shape in times of quiet war. Let us call him Aaron, though the syllables no longer matter. He worked in the transit control tower overlooking the city's arterial tramways, an unremarkable position, but one that saw every movement of the city, its rhythms, delays, dispersals, gatherings. He noticed patterns before he understood them. Work shifts converging where they should not. Crowds forming without announcement. The same groups traveling together every day, breathing in the same cadence, turning their heads at the same moment, as though following choreography only they could hear. Aaron told himself it was coincidence, until he saw his sister among them. She had once laughed loudly, too loudly, head thrown back, unashamed. But the woman he saw in the synchronized crowd did not laugh. She did not blink. Her face was serene, emptied of all its wildness. He called her name. She did not turn. She did not recognize him. Her eyes passed over him as though he were a stranger or a shadow already fading. Something broke in him then, but not the way the Patriarch desired. He began to collect evidence, not grand revelations, small things, a misrouted tram schedule, a block of HAB units where no lights ever turned off, a water treatment report that repeated the same exact phrasing for 6 consecutive cycles, patterns, threads, a tapestry revealed. He spoke to priests. They offered prayers. He spoke to arbitrators. They offered warnings. He spoke to workers. They offered silence. The city had already begun to turn inward. So Aaron did what the cult would never expect. He remembered. He remembered each face, each name, each moment of joy, sorrow, and life that existed before. He did not fight for the Emperor. He fought for the memory of being human. But memory is a fragile blade against a creature made of hunger. The cult sensed him, not by words nor actions, but by the discord of his breathing. One who does not match the rhythm cannot remain unseen. The hive mind felt the irregularity, felt the lone heartbeat refusing to join the chorus. They began to watch him, not with hatred, with inevitability. For to the cult, Aaron is not an enemy. He is a part that has not yet learned its purpose, and the Patriarch does not tolerate unfinished work. The hive mind does not recognize rebellion as defiance. It recognizes it as incompletion, a song missing one voice, a limb that has not yet learned to move with the organism. And so, when Aaron refused the call, when his breath did not align with the collective rhythm, the cult did not immediately seek to destroy him. Destruction would be wasteful. Instead, they marked him, not with ink, not with brand or blade, with attention. At first, he only felt it, the sensation of being observed when alone, the quiet hush that followed him in market corridors, conversations ending the moment he entered a room, a door that should have slid open hesitated for half a second too long. These were not accidents. They were tests, pressures applied like fingers on glass, searching for cracks. Aaron attempted to maintain routine. He rose at the same hour, drank the same bitter recaf, walked to the transit tower, reviewed routing data, but even the tower felt different now. The lights flickered in a subtle rhythm, on 2 beats, off 1, that matched the breath of the cult below. He could no longer unsee it. He could no longer pretend the city itself was not breathing. He confided in a co-worker once, a man named Solrin, tired-eyed, ordinary. Aaron whispered the truth in fragments, people changing, strange unison, his sister. Solrin listened, expression unreadable. Then Solrin smiled, not with his mouth, with his stillness, the smile of one who has already given himself to something greater. Aaron did not speak again. From that moment, the cult no longer watched him from a distance. They began to appear, not threatening, never threatening. A neighbor sweeping steps at midnight when Aaron returned home. A group of workers silently sharing a meal at the tram station as he passed. His supervisor placing a hand gently on his shoulder and saying, "You look tired. Come rest with us sometime." Every gesture was kindness sharpened into a trap. The cult does not coerce. It invites. Because surrender is most complete when chosen. Aaron locked his door that night. He barred the windows. He sat with his head in his hands, struggling to breathe against the weight of the city's pulse pressing against his ribs. Memories surged. Laughter at the dinner table, the warmth of shared childhood, his sister's hand gripping his during storms. All of it, real, human, individual. He pressed his fist against his chest, as though he could hold onto himself by force. Outside, footsteps gathered, soft, many, not marching, waiting. They did not knock. They did not call his name. They simply stood in silence, breathing together on the other side of the thin hab wall. The world, in that moment, felt impossibly small. Aaron realized then what the hive mind had already understood. This was not a struggle between faith and unbelief. It was a struggle between memory and belonging. And the cost of remembering was loneliness, the kind that devours. Night in the city had once been merely darkness, street lamps flickering, the distant clatter of manufacturer engines winding down, the tired hush of workers returning to their bunks. But now, night had become a listening thing. It held its breath. It waited. It pressed in close, thick and heavy, as if the very air feared to move. The hive mind had expanded. Its rhythm thrummed through pipes, through water lines, through the tram rails, that webbed the city like veins. It had become impossible to exist within these walls without feeling the pulse of another presence underneath one's own heartbeat. Aaron felt it acutely. Sleep no longer came naturally. His dreams were no longer his own, filled with visions of endless plains of chitin and bone, of stars consumed like embers in a void wind. Each time he woke, he could almost feel the Patriarch's breath on the back of his mind, warm, patient, inevitable. Yet Aaron refused to surrender. He held on to memory like a drowning man gripping driftwood. He began moving at night, when fewer eyes, human or otherwise, tracked him. He mapped routes through service corridors and rooftops, avoiding communal spaces where the cult gathered without appearing to gather. He learned which streets hummed with the rhythm of the hive, and he avoided them. He learned to breathe irregularly, short, uneven breaths, to keep the hive mind from sensing his pattern. He learned to think in broken cadences, interrupting his own thoughts to remain unaligned. But the cult noticed even this. Their silence changed. It was no longer merely watchful. It became anticipatory. One night, Aaron crossed the transit causeway, overlooking the lower Hab districts. The city stretched out before him, its windows faintly glowing, its walkways nearly empty. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then he realized the lights were flickering. Not randomly, but in synchrony. Entire blocks pulsed with a steady, slow rhythm, like lungs inhaling and exhaling. The city was not just influenced by the hive mind. The city was breathing. Aaron staggered back, pressing himself against the railing. He forced his mind to recall anything human. His sister's laughter, the sound of rain on sheet metal roofs, the warmth of shared bread after long shifts. He repeated these memories like prayers, but the city exhaled again, and the hiss of air moving through ventilation ducts sounded disturbingly like a chorus whispering his name. He fled, down stairwells, across loading docks, through alleys where shadows pooled like thick oil. But the cult did not chase him. They simply appeared, standing at the ends of corridors, seated on abandoned crates, leaning against railings, breathing, watching. Their presence was not a threat. It was invitation made visible. Their faces were calm, their bodies still, their unity absolute. Aaron's chest tightened, his pulse faltered. The air felt too heavy to draw in. It was as though the city itself refused to let him breathe alone. He realized then the truth. The hive mind was no longer beneath the city. It was the city, and he was the only heartbeat left out of rhythm. There comes a point in any resistance where survival alone ceases to be enough. The mind must choose, to disappear quietly or to reach back against the tide. Aaron reached back, not publicly, not with banners or declarations, but with a single decision that had weight far beyond itself. He attempted to save one. Not the city, not the world, just one soul lost to the hive. His sister. Her name, once spoken with warmth, now tasted like a wound. Lyra. He whispered it to himself in the silence of his hiding places, as though the sound alone could anchor the world. Lyra had not always been serene, empty-eyed and synchronized. She had been unruly. She had been ungovernable. She had once claimed she would leave the city, see other worlds, breathe air that wasn't stained with refinery exhaust. She had dreamed, and dreams are impossible under the hive. The cult believed she was complete, perfect, one with the swarm. Aaron believed her humanity was only buried, not erased. He watched her from afar, memorizing the routes she walked, the gatherings she attended, the rhythms she obeyed. His memories of her laughter clashed painfully with the quiet, obedient creature she had become. But pain was clarity. Pain reminded him of what had been stolen. The opportunity came in the form of a storm. The city's upper vents rattled with wind. Rain hammered the metal rooftops. Visibility blurred. The hive mind's usual precision wavered slightly beneath the noise of weather. The rhythm of the city stuttered, if only by a fraction. Aaron moved. He intercepted Lyra at a service corridor between transit terminals, an industrial artery of humming pipes and steam where few ventured. She walked at the center of a group of cultists, all breathing as one. Aaron stepped from the shadows, voice shaking. Lyra. The group stopped. The air went still. Lyra turned. Her expression did not change. Her eyes did not widen in recognition. Her posture remained perfectly calm, but her breath faltered, just once. A single hitch between inhalation and exhalation. Aaron saw it. A fracture. "Do you remember me?" His voice trembled. "Do you remember us?" Silence stretched. The other cultists stared, motionless. Lyra blinked. It was the slowest blink Aaron had ever seen. And when her eyes opened again, something flickered behind them. Not thought, memory. A spark. A ghost. The echo of laughter in a kitchen lit by a flickering bulb. Her lips parted, not to speak, but to breathe wrong, out of rhythm. The cultists tensed. The hive mind does not tolerate dissonance. Aaron stepped forward, reaching, not to pull her away, but to hold her hand, the way he once had when storms frightened her as a child. "Come with me," he whispered. For a heartbeat, the world balanced between two futures. Then Lyra's hand twitched toward his. Not fully, not freely, but toward him. The hive noticed. The city inhaled sharply. And the patriarch awoke. There are moments in history when a world holds its breath, when silence becomes a blade, when a single gesture fractures inevitability. Lyra's reaching hand, small, trembling, imperfect, did not break the hive mind, but it disturbed it. And disturbance within unity is not tolerated. The 14th stage begins when the hive ceases to observe and begins to act. The cultists surrounding Lyra did not shout. They did not lunge. They did not even move at first. Their stillness was more terrifying than any aggression. Their eyes widened, not in emotion, but in recognition of an error, a deviation, a crack in the perfect surface of the collective soul. They inhaled together, long, slow, deep, sinking themselves back to the rhythm as if to drown out the discord. But Lyra did not resume the breath. She stood suspended between patterns, the former human self struggling to rise and the hive-tuned self tightening around her. Her fingers curled a fraction closer toward Aaron's outstretched hand. And in that moment, the patriarch saw. Not through eyes, through mind. A psychic shock rippled through the underground sanctum, radiating out like the tremor before a tectonic break. The tunnels vibrated. The air thickened. Every cultist in the city exhaled at once, a shuddering sigh that echoed through corridors and chambers. Thousands of spines stiffened simultaneously. Thousands of pupils dilated. The hive mind turned its awareness, fully, directly, upon Aaron. To be seen by the hive was not like being watched by another person. It was like being unmade. Aaron felt his thoughts grow loud inside his skull, amplified, exposed. Memories he clung to, Lyra's laughter, their childhood storms, shared secrets under cracked roof tiles, were suddenly illuminated, examined by something vast, ancient, and starving. The patriarch did not feel anger. It felt correction. Lyra's breathing accelerated. She clutched her temples, teeth clenched, as if two oceans were crashing inside her skull. The cultists stepped forward, not running, not striking, but closing around Aaron with the certainty of gravity. Aaron grabbed Lyra's hand. Her skin was cold. Her fingers twitched, uncertain, alive. He pulled, not with strength, with memory, with the sheer force of remembering her humanity. "Lyra," he whispered, voice cracking, "you chose your name. You chose who you were, before them, before this, before—" Her eyes flickered, pupils shrinking, dilating, shrinking again. A war raged behind them that had no words. The cultists surged. Aaron dragged her into motion, sprinting down the corridor. Pipes hissed overhead. Lights flickered in rhythmic patterns meant to disorient the unjoined. Footsteps echoed behind, too synchronized, too unified to be fully human. The hive mind pulsed in every surface, every vent, every rail. Aaron's lungs burned. Lyra stumbled beside him, breaths uneven, erratic. Hers. Then the city exhaled. A pulse of psychic command reverberated through every cultist at once. The chant began, not aloud but inside the mind. "Join! Join! Join!" Lyra screamed, not in devotion, in remembered terror. The hive had chosen. It would reclaim her, or it would consume her. Aaron had never run like this before, not as a child fleeing summer storms, not as a man trying to catch the last tram home. This was not running for safety. This was running to keep identity from being devoured. Lyra stumbled beside him, her breaths uneven, her steps disordered, not in the synchronized cadence of the Hive. The cultists behind them moved without sound, their footfalls synchronized, their chests rising and falling as one. They did not chase with urgency. They did not need to. The Hive always closes its gaps. Aaron knew the city better than most. Years in the transit tower had etched its arteries into his mind. Maintenance corridors, service hatches, forgotten tram bypasses. He turned down a narrow stairwell lit by flickering lumen strips, each one pulsing faintly, like the heartbeat of something buried beneath the metal floor. Lyra's hand trembled in his, not resisting, not yielding, flickering. They descended into the underlevels, pipes stretched overhead like veins. Condensation dripped like sweat. The hum of machinery deepened into something more organic, as if the city were not built but grown. The hive mind's rhythm echoed faintly here, but fractured. Aaron could still hear his own breathing, his own heartbeat. He forced Lyra to match his rhythm, irregular, uneven, like ocean waves breaking against jagged stone. "Remember," he whispered, voice raw. "Remember who you were. Say your name." Lyra's lips parted. No sound came. That was enough to make Aaron's chest ache. Behind them, the cultists' descent was slower, unhurried. They were not tracking by sound. They were following a thread. The hive mind does not search. It knows. Aaron led Lyra into a disused transport terminal. Rows of rusted benches, a cracked mural depicting the Emperor's light shining upon obedient citizens. Dust hung thick in the air, disturbed only by their movement. Here, the rhythm weakened further. The city's pulse did not quite reach. A sanctuary carved from disrepair. Lyra sank onto a bench, hands gripping its metal edge hard enough to whiten her knuckles. Her eyes flickered rapidly, as though two minds were fighting for her skull. Aaron knelt before her. "Lyra," he whispered, "tell me anything you remember. Anything. Your favorite food. The color you hated. The joke you used to tell. Anything. Reach for it." Her breath caught. A word surfaced. Shaky. Broken. "Rain." Aaron's eyes burned. "Yes, rain. You used to dance in it. You said it felt like the sky remembering you." Her face twisted. Pain. Strain. Resistance. But resistance was life. The hive mind surged in response. A psychic pressure pressed down on them, like a great weight of ocean water forcing the lungs still. Lyra gasped. Aaron felt his mind tugged, every memory stretched thin. He held her shoulders, voice fierce now. "You are not them. You are Lyra. You are my Lyra. You are not a vessel. You are not a limb. You are—" The room's shadows shifted. The cultists had arrived. They did not speak. They only breathed. Aaron rose to stand between them and his sister. The silent war had ended. The loud war had begun. The weight of the hive mind descended like an eclipse, cold and absolute, covering the last remaining fragments of defiance. Aaron felt it first in his chest, a pressure that had no name, an absence of air, a tightening in the space between his ribs. The cultists, now fully encircling the terminal, did not move. They did not need to. They were presence itself, solid, unyielding, the physical embodiment of unity. Each face was blank, their bodies still, as if they were carved from the same stone as the city's foundations. Lyra trembled beside him, her hands clutching the bench as if it might anchor her to the ground. Her breaths were shallow, uneven, but they were still her breaths, not the harmonious rhythm of the cult. Her eyes were wide, darting, lost somewhere between the fragments of what had been and the weight of what was about to consume her. The patriarch's call echoed faintly in the back of her mind, like a whisper just beyond the reach of memory. Aaron took a slow step forward, his chest rising and falling in an irregular rhythm. The cult's gaze turned to him, not with anger or hatred, but with something far colder. There was no malice in their eyes, only patience. They had already chosen. They were already one. They were not to be swayed, not to be moved. They only needed him to cease existing. He could feel the Patriarch's presence now, not like a distant shadow, but like something that filled the entire space. It was not a voice, it was a force. It was the collective mind of 1,000 souls stretched across the city. It was hunger made manifest, a vast, unfathomable longing that had never known what it meant to be sated. He felt it invade his mind, a slow, twisting slide of consciousness. He felt himself dissolving, the lines between his thoughts and theirs blurring, until all that was left was the knowledge that he was a part of something greater, something that had no end, no limit. The Patriarch's will was like the tide, relentless, inevitable, all-encompassing. And yet, in the back of his mind, something still held. Aaron took another step forward, his eyes locked on Lyra. His hand reached for hers, not in love, not in hope, but in defiance. He whispered the words that had clung to his soul for so long. You are Lyra. You are mine. You are not theirs. For a moment the air hung still. The cultists shifted, their breath coming in one slow, synchronized inhalation. The pressure of the Patriarch's presence seemed to pull at the edges of reality itself. And then, a single, broken breath. Lyra's eyes locked with his. For one fleeting moment, the weight of the hive mind loosened, and something like humanity flared in her gaze. She lifted her hand, not to join the cult, not to surrender, but to reach for something lost, for a name, for a self. And then the city exhaled. Aaron felt his body shudder under the weight of it. The Patriarch's gaze fell on them both. The final moment was not a roar, it was a sigh. The end had begun. The moment of defiance did not break the hive mind. It did not shatter the Patriarch's hold. It was only a crack in a wall that would soon be sealed. The cultists, their eyes empty but patient, closed in slowly, methodically. Aaron felt the pressure in his chest deepen, as if the city itself had become a cage, and he was the last prisoner who had not yet learned to lie still. The Patriarch did not speak, but its presence filled the air, thick and suffocating, a weight that pressed down from every direction. Lyra's hand trembled in his, but she did not pull away. She was still there, still her. For a moment, Aaron dared to believe that the last thread of memory, the last vestige of human will, had survived the flood. She had reached for him. She had resisted, even for just a breath, but the city breathed as one, and the swarm knew. The cultists did not move quickly. They had no need to. Their unity was not a force of speed, but of inevitability. Each of them was a part of the whole. Each of them was both a soldier and a servant. There was no self to protect, no identity to defend. They were the tide, and the tide would not be stopped. Aaron could feel his thoughts stretching thin, pulled by an unseen force. His body trembled with the strain of holding on to himself, the last remnants of his humanity fighting against the growing hunger that sought to consume it. He looked into Lyra's eyes, desperate for some sign of the person she once was, but what he saw was only the same empty, rhythmic gaze that stared back from every other cultist, but she was still there. Lyra, he whispered, the words barely escaping his dry throat. You don't have to do this. You don't have to be one of them. Her lips parted, a single breath catching in her chest. Her face was still soft, still human in the dim light of the terminal. But then, just as quickly, her expression softened into something else. Her pupils dilated, her head tilting slightly, as though listening to something beyond him. Something that called to her from deep within the city, from the heart of the hive. And Aaron saw it then, the truth that had been circling around him, elusive, like the final piece of a puzzle he had not known he was solving. The cult was not just a force. It was not just the Patriarch. It was the city itself. The veins of metal, the pipes, the exhausts, the hum of machinery, all of it had been woven into the swarm. The cult was not an infection. It was the city's soul, breathing in time with its every function. Aaron felt a surge of despair, but then Lyra's eyes flickered again. Just for a moment, something human sparked in her gaze, a flicker of recognition, a single, fragile thought that had survived the storm. And Aaron clung to it, but the cult closed in, the pressure of the swarm too great, and Lyra's hand slipped from his. The city inhaled, the last breath he would ever take as a man. The end was here. The moment Lyra's hand slipped from his, it was as though the very air turned to stone. Aaron's world collapsed inward, a spiral of tightening vision and stifled breath. The swarm surged forward, not with violence, but with a quiet, deliberate certainty that overwhelmed him. The walls of the terminal seemed to fold in on themselves, closing around him like the jaws of some monstrous, ancient thing. There was no escape. There was no fight. There was only the pull, the overwhelming gravitational pull of the hive. Lyra stood before him, not the woman he had once known, but a vessel. Her eyes, once filled with life, were now dark, endless pools, reflecting only the hive's will. She was still her, but she was not. The threads that once connected her to the world, to Aaron, to herself, had unraveled, leaving only the empty space where a soul used to be. And yet, in her stillness, there was a strange, unholy peace. A calm that seeped into him as the swarm encircled them, as though the mere act of being one was enough to erase all the noise, all the suffering, all the fragmentation. Aaron's heart beat loud in his ears, a frantic, desperate thud. He fought to think, to remember. The city had become one with the cult. He had always known it in his bones, but now it was undeniable. The streets, the alleys, the homes, the pipes, the air, it was all one organism, pulsating with a single mind, a single purpose. The patriarch, a vast intelligence, did not rule over them. It was them. It was the city, and the city was its will. And in that moment, Aaron realized the true horror of the hive. It was not the loss of humanity. It was not the slaughter of individuals. It was the loss of memory, the loss of difference. The swarm did not force you to join. It simply forgot you ever existed as anything else. The pressure in his chest grew unbearable. He staggered, his mind fighting to stay tethered to reality. He wanted to scream, to fight, but there was no one left to hear. The cultists closed around him, their movements slow and unhurried, but their presence suffocating. They did not need to speak. Their silence was louder than any cry. Aaron turned his gaze back to Lyra. She stood still, motionless, her lips curling into a soft, vacant smile. It was not a smile of joy. It was not a smile of sorrow. It was the smile of a being that no longer had a self to question. And then, in a voice that was not her own, she spoke. "We are one." The words fell from her lips like a prayer, a hymn, a promise. Aaron's soul screamed in silent protest. He could feel himself slipping away, his mind unraveling like the threads that had once tied him to her. The city, the swarm, the hive. It was too much. He breathed in and felt himself disappear. And as he exhaled, so did the last remnants of his humanity. The cult had claimed him. It had claimed them all. When the last breath left Aaron's body, it was not with a gasp. It was not with a scream. It was with a surrender, a final letting go. His soul, for a fleeting moment, still clung to the fragments of who he had been. But those fragments scattered like ash before the wind, carried away by the unrelenting current of the hive mind. There was no sound, no explosion of light, only the gnawing silence of the city as it consumed him completely. Lyra stood before him, her figure now not just part of the swarm, but one with it. her eyes dark and empty. She was not lost. She had been reclaimed. He had always known that the cult's reach extended beyond flesh, but now he understood its true power. The hive did not just consume the body. It devoured the self, all that made you unique, all that set you apart. In its place, it offered unity, a unity that erased pain, doubt, and division, a unity that was the city. The cultists stood in perfect alignment, their bodies moving as one, their minds threaded through the same thought, the same will. There were no more individuals. There were only vessels. The Patriarch's will coursed through them like a bloodline, thick and endless, unbroken. They were as ancient as the city itself, as inevitable as the decay of time. Arine's body had already begun to shift. He could feel the stillness of the transformation, the slow, inexorable merging of flesh into the machine. His once human form blurred and twisted, muscles stretching and bones re-knitting in patterns that had no place for emotion or history. There was no pain, no discomfort, only the perfect, serene erosion of identity. In the distance, the hum of the city pulsed louder. The machinery below ground began to stir, as though the earth itself had taken a deep, steady breath in preparation for something far larger than this city, far larger than the cult. Aaron could hear the echo of 1,000 minds thinking together, synchronized, moving toward a single, unbreakable purpose. The end was not something that arrived. The end had already arrived. The swarm moved, and so did the city. There was no longer any separation between them. The streets that had once been his home now stretched endlessly, not as roads leading to destinations, but as conduits for the pulse of the hive. The buildings that once housed the living were now the limbs of something greater, something that had consumed them, and in return, they had been reborn as extension. The citizens of the city were no more. They had become cells in an organism too vast to comprehend, too infinite to resist. The Patriarch stirred. It felt the last struggle within Aaron, and it smiled. The final unity had come, and with it, the silence that devoured. There was nothing left but the heartbeat of the hive, and Aaron was a part of it, forever. Time itself had become irrelevant. There were no clocks left, no minutes or hours to measure the passing of existence. The city, once bustling with movement, now felt frozen, its pulse no longer defined by the ticking of mechanical hands, but by the slow, inexorable rhythm of the hive. A pulse that beat through the very stone and metal, through the flesh of those who once walked beneath the sky. The cult, now a perfect reflection of the Patriarch's will, moved without thought, without hesitation. Their actions were no longer decisions. They were functions. Aaron, if he still could be called such, felt the shift in himself. It was not the loss of form. He had long since ceased to care about that. It was the loss of memory. The person who had once been Aaron, the man who had loved and struggled, was becoming a distant shadow. He could still remember fragments, the warmth of Lyra's hand, the feeling of air against his skin, the sound of his own name. But they were fading, slipping away like dust in the wind. His identity was crumbling into the great void of the hive mind, a faint echo that would soon be swallowed. But there were others still holding on to the last remnants of what they had been. Somewhere in the depths of the city, a whisper stirred. It was faint, barely audible, but it had weight, a sound that trembled through the veil of the swarm. It was the sound of something still human trying to break free, a mind not yet fully consumed, a soul still clinging to something it had once been. The cultists did not hear it. They could not. Their minds were not their own, and in their perfection, they were deaf to anything that had not already been absorbed. But Aaron heard it. A flicker. A memory that refused to die. It was the sound of himself. A self that had not yet vanished. A self that still could choose. In the far reaches of the city, There were cracks beginning to form, small, unnoticed fissures in the perfect unity of the hive. For the first time, the thought of disobedience, of defection, reached Aaron. It was a fleeting thought, an impossibility he had long ago discarded. But it held weight. It held meaning. There was something deeper than the patriarch's will, deeper than the collective breath of the swarm. It was regret. He could still regret what had been lost. He could still grieve for what had been taken from him. The city, for all its unity, had never been perfect. It had always held the seed of something broken within it, a fracture, a fault. And though Aaron could feel himself slipping further away, there was one last thing that remained untouched. His regret. The patriarch's will surged forward, tightening around him like a noose, and for a fleeting moment, Aaron wondered if it would be enough to sever the final thread that connected him to humanity. But deep within him, something held firm. Something still fought. And for the first time in what felt like eternity, Aaron whispered the words he thought he had forgotten. I remember. The city was silent now, its pulse steady and unbroken. But within that silence, a hum of something ancient, something forgotten, still lingered. Aaron's mind, tangled with the hive mind's overwhelming force, could feel the faint, fragile spark of humanity that remained within him, barely flickering, but there nonetheless. It was not a loud, triumphant defiance. It was not a battle cry. It was only a whisper, a thought, a memory. And yet, it was enough to feel. The cult around him moved without pause, a perfect, seamless unit. They breathed as one, thought as one, moved as one. Their eyes were vacant, empty of any individual thought, any personal will. They were the very embodiment of the patriarch's design, without question, without hesitation. A vast collective force that stretched across the city, its reach never ending, its hunger unyielding. But Aaron, still tethered to his fractured humanity, felt something different. He felt grief, not for himself, not for the loss of his name, his body, or his place in the world. Those things were gone. They had already been consumed by the swarm. But he grieved for the city, for the people who had once walked its streets, breathed its air, and lived their lives in its shadow. They were gone now, replaced by this unified hunger. A hunger that was never satisfied, never finished. It was an endless cycle of consumption, but one that left nothing but hollow shells in its wake. He could feel the very streets beneath his feet, the walls around him, the buildings above. All of it had become part of the swarm. It was no longer just the people. The city had become the hive. The roads, the tunnels, the factories, every inch of the vast, sprawling metropolis was part of the patriarch's design. Everything was joined. There was no division, no separation. There was only the all-encompassing unity of the swarm. And yet, as Aaron stood there, lost in the rhythm of the hive, he felt something deeper. Something that the patriarch could not claim. Something that the collective could not swallow. It was the echo of every life that had been consumed, every thought, every dream, every hope that had once filled the city. It was the lingering trace of individuality that refused to be erased. In the vast emptiness of the hive, that trace still whispered. The cultists around him did not hear it. They could not. Their minds were no longer their own. But Aaron could. He could feel the weight of those forgotten souls, those lost memories, pressing against him, urging him to remember, to hold on to the last pieces of humanity that remained. Even now, as he stood on the precipice of complete assimilation, those echoes surrounded him like ghosts. And Aaron knew, deep within himself, that this was all that was left. The memory of what had been. It was not a victory. It was not a defeat. It was only the last breath of the lost. The final fracture in the hive. And he remembered.